We're excited about getting back out on the field. Obviously, we out practicing here in a few minutes, and anxious to get back out there. We had, I think, a really, really productive off week, and I think that, as I've mentioned before, I think that sometimes those things become one of those situations to where you wish that you didn't have one because of you're on a roll. There's other times whenever you need to get healthy, and so they're very good. I think this one came at a really good time for us. I think one of the biggest issues with our schedule, which has kind of been the case in the past also, there's not a lot of tune-up games for us because of just the nature of our out-of-conference schedule. And so consequently, you're not able maybe to dip down into your 2s and 3s and get those guys meaningful reps in a ball game. And for us this off week, because of our first 3 ball games and how close those games were, it was a good opportunity for us to actually get back and include our younger players, our 2s and 3s, in some practice opportunities. And so I was excited about that. I think those players were too, that we were able to be more inclusive with that group and give them some repetitions and engage that group a little bit more. And I think we got something done with them. That obviously gives you that opportunity to kind of rest some of your ones. We went back, obviously, and looked at our first 3 ball games, and I think, again, it becomes very apparent about, kind of what your team is like, who you're playing with, who's really responded really well over a 3-game time frame. And obviously that impacts the number of repetitions they're going to that they got in practice last week, along with, kind of what's going for moving forward. And I think the other thing that's obviously essential right now is the fact that from a recruiting standpoint, as fast as recruiting's moving nowadays, that opportunity to really go out and watch players play. It's kind of a lost art nowadays because now you got all the video and the huddle accounts and all the highlight tapes and all that kind of thing that as I was mentioning to Nick earlier, right? We probably get 50 probably a day from all across the country of kids interested, wanting us to evaluate them, all that. That doesn't mean they're necessarily interested in us. They're just interested sometimes in getting more offers. But it is nice to go out and watch games. I was able to go out and watch some games along with the rest of our staff, and so we were able to utilize that time frame to really get a good idea of not what a guy's highlights are like, but how hard does a guy play? How does his team respond to him, and how does he respond in adversity and success? And so that was fun for me just to get back out and recruit also. So Sunday came back and practice, had a really, really good practice, and obviously, again, here in a few minutes, anxious to get back out on the field with them again today. We're obviously facing a Troy team that, has rightfully so really had laid claim to the conference championship for years around here. And Larry does a great job. Larry Blakeney, the head coach there, obviously he's got the field named after him. Anytime you get a field named after you, you've done a great job. They're going to stress us with their schemes, and not everybody does that. Some people just really stress you with their athletes and kind of what that group can do. They're going to stress you with their schemes on both sides of the football, and so there's some things that obviously create some concern from a schematic standpoint. I think once again, like all Troy teams, they're very, very athletic, and they've had some tough breaks. Things haven't. They're a little bit younger football team maybe than what they've been in the past, and or newer to their program to some degree because of the number of junior college players that are, in the program making an impact now. And I know that they're going to be excited about playing us, to opening the conference season for them. We have a lot of things to play for also, and so we're excited about getting back out on the field also and playing back at home. We don't have any more home games. We need to take advantage of them. So, questions?
Todd, I was going to ask you about them opening up conference play as that relates to putting Georgia quickly behind them. I don't know how beaten up they got in that game. But if you look at their statistics, they seem to be giving up a lot of yards offensively, almost 400 or 500 yards a ball game. So, and big plays too. I think I noticed almost 9 plays of 40-plus they've given up. So there's got to be some vulnerability there.
Well, I think that, again, they have a significant number of new players right now that are playing for them. And anytime that you have new players, whether they be young players or new players to your systems, a junior college player, for instance, that there's going to be time periods when people are going to get out of position, and I think a lot of those big plays have come off that. I think the other thing that you're looking at is their offense has been very explosive, but somewhat inconsistent at times also. I think in the past you always knew that that was an offense that you really had to deal with. I mean, and they were going to be out there. They had a mature quarterback. They had all those other kinds of things, great receiver, good running backs. And they still have those guys. They're just not quite as consistent. And so consequently, the opposing offense is having more opportunities too, which leads to more yards. They came out 14-0 against Duke, right off the bat, and they've just had some difficult things that have happened to them throughout the course of this early part of the season. Coach Blakeney does a great job. I'm sure that they are again starting conference play, and so they're going to be excited about all their goals and aspirations in relation to winning the conference championship and bowl games and all that kind of stuff are still all out there for them. And to some degree, they can look at it. You've heard me talk about this before, that it's hard as a coach to get into this. It's hard as a player, but quite honestly, for them, that was their preseason. Their preseason games are over with now, and now it's time for everything to count for real. And I'm sure he's selling that along those lines. And obviously, we've had a little bit of success against them. I'm sure that's going to be another motivational thought for them in relation to the fact that we have had some success. And I think, if I'm correct, I think in 2010 we were the first one to beat them in quite some time, a conference opponent to beat them. And so for those players that have been in their program for a while, I'm sure they're anxious, again, to get back out on the field against us.
His youth, I've noticed too statistically as it relates to penalties, boy, they have buku of them. So is that more of a discipline thing that they lack? Or?
Well, I don't know if it's a lack of discipline. I think that, generally speaking, younger players are going to tend to have more penalties than older players are. And, I've been pleased with, really over the last 3 years, our numbers have been pretty good along those lines, and that's something that we really strive to do. And, we have officials out of practice and scrimmages to make sure, and then our coaches, we're on to our players all the time in relation to that, because you're going to get called, and the only thing it's going to do is impact you. And so we monitor it in practice also. But, the first thing that we have to do as a football team is we have to be disciplined, take care of the football, and have less penalties, and that's true for everybody.
What do you think you guys, I know you said you guys had good practice on Sunday, but what do you need to do to just have the momentum coming out of the open week that you had at the beginning of the season?
I think that I think when players practice well, they tend to play well. And I think this group understands – they enjoy practice, I think. This group enjoys the grind, I think. And they have fun out there. We do a lot of competitive things against each other because we want the speed of the game, and I think it energizes practice to some degree, and rather than always being against scout teams. And so we do a lot of competitive stuff against each other. And but I think that if you practice well, then you tend to play well. I think that, quite honestly, I think all the motivation and all that kind of thing, I don't think that lasts very long. I mean, all the big pregame speeches and the this and that and all the things that are special about a ball game, it doesn't. I mean, you get out there at first snap, and I know as a player, and I think these players say the same thing. It's fun. I love that time frame right before a ball game, when you know that everything that you've done is getting exposed. Everything that you've done is going to get exposed out there for a lot of people to see. But quite honestly, in terms of just, I've always found that if you practice well, you tend to play well, and if you don't practice well, you don't tend to play well, regardless how motivated you are. So again, motivation doesn't last very long.
Looking at the quarterbacks, I know that Silvers had a concussion against Abilene Christian, and so they're not. I don't think it's been cleared as of Blakeney's press conference yesterday. But looking at these two quarterbacks, do you see similarities that they recruited to the type of offense they normally run with the Cody Robinson, Levi Brown, those previous quarterbacks?
Well, Cody was a phenomenal player, and he really ran that show. I think that they've got two really good quarterbacks, and I think they're a little bit unique in terms of what they do. And I have not heard anything in relation to number 12 quarterback. That's Silvers. That's his name, right? Silvers, yeah. And Yeah, I was impressed with him, though. I mean, for a redshirt freshman, kind of coming out there and doing kind of what he did, and obviously he understands the system, throws a nice ball, manages the game well, all that kind of thing. And then number 1, Dontrell Pruitt, is a talented guy, very athletic. He's tough to pin up in the pocket. A little bit more unconventional sometimes in relation to how he kind of gets his balls out in relation to number 12. So I don't know. We're going to prepare for both of them. They are different types of quarterbacks, but they are still running the same Troy system that they've always run.
Todd, I don't know that you would tell us on camera whether or not.
Well, then I probably won't.
Or if by chance you're feeling liberal today.
Okay.
Offensively, obviously you were limited to what you could do in Baton Rouge, but I still think you're still searching for that opportunity to open this playbook up a little bit more. You think we'll see a little bit more of that? The guys are feeling a little bit more comfortable through 4 weeks, or?
Yeah, I think that we'll see a little bit more of that. I think that it's been really significant in kind of what we're doing right now, and I knew going into this season that one of the things that Colton, he just wanted to get back here and run around, right? And so that's kind of what we let him do. I think that in the games that we've owned the line of scrimmage, we've played well. And whenever we don't own the line of scrimmage, we're not near as effective. And so we have to understand that as coaches. We have to understand that as players. And in those games where all of a sudden it becomes difficult to own the line of scrimmage, we need to have another plan ready to go instead of just saying, well, we're going to own the line of scrimmage, because that's not necessarily always going to be the case.
That being said, do you like the matchups in the trenches?
Well, I think that there's certainly the challenges on both sides of the football. I think that in relation to this matchup, in relation to LSU, then it's better. But LSU's had some different guys up front than everybody else in the country does. That's why they're a top-ranked team. We'll have our hands full on both sides, but I hope too that they'll have their hands full with us too. This game has tended to be a very, very physical game in the trenches. I don't think we played very well last year in the offensive line. I think it was one of our worst ball games, quite honestly, when we played Troy last year. And that's so we need to take on that challenge as a group. And again, the group's worked hard, and I expect them to do that. We had nice physical practices last week, and expect more this week.
You said this is one of the most special defenses you've had since you've been here. So what are they doing just to make themselves stand out this season from game to game?
Well, obviously they're athletic. This is the most athletic defensive group that we've had. But this is the most mature group we've had too. And when you've got athleticism and you have maturity, then you give yourself a chance, and now you just need to add a little work ethic to it, and then things go pretty well. I think our players on defense have experienced that. And the challenge for our defense right now is we've played really, really well against 2 run teams in Wake Forest and LSU, and we're committed to stopping the run. We didn't play as well against a passing team in Idaho. So their challenge this week, obviously, with what Troy does, is Troy's a throwing team. Wake Forest and LSU are not. They can't throw the ball very well. And so now our challenge becomes, now can we defend the pass? Obviously they've seen an awful lot from our own offense over the years to understand, I think, a little bit more about the passing game, quite honestly, sometimes than the run game. But that's the real challenge now for our defense, is to step up this week and answer against a passing team.
We haven't really seen you since the post-game at LSU.
Have you missed me?
I really have.
Okay.
And I guess I could have gotten up at the 7 a.m. practices that y'all had last week.
6 o'clock a.m. practices.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Dusty was here.
You wouldn't want to see me then. I'm very grumpy.
Okay.
But with the way that you were very frustrated after that LSU game, and I know that a lot of the players that I saw in post-game were also very frustrated, how was the response with those practices last week, starting with the Sunday practice and just wanting to bounce back?
It was good. Yeah, it was good. I trust this team implicitly. They've been with this staff, and they've been around each other for quite some time. I don't think there's no surprises, and that's what happens when you grow a team up together. I think they understood how I was going to handle things, and I think they understood how the staff was going to handle things and how they were going to interact with each other. It was, one of the best things about that game was the fact that we were very frustrated after the ball game, and that's a good thing. And I mean, on the bus ride back, it was quiet. I mean, it was quiet, and it wasn't like, I better be quiet or Coach Berry is going to just tear my throat out or something like that. It was one of those things to where I think that, again, when you have some expectations, you don't meet the expectations, then you're disappointed to the point to where it's just eats at you. And it was eating at me after the ball game. It's ate at me ever since that time frame, and I think it has ate at our players. But I think they recognize kind of what we need to do in terms of getting better. I think that's been I think they've seen those exposures to understand kind of what we need to do, and I think this group wants to go to work, and that's kind of what they proved last week, is that they'll continue to do that.
Through 4 games, do you think your offense has an identity, and if so, what do you think that is?
Well, first of all, we've only had 3.
Oh, excuse me.
And I think we'd like to be a run-play action team right now, and I think that fits our personnel really well. And one of the things that we had a difficult time with to some degree against LSU was obviously establishing any kind of run. And if you can't establish the run, then it becomes difficult to do the play action. I think that the passing game tends to take a little bit longer. It's not one of those things to where you just throw everybody out there and say, okay, there's 29 practice opportunities, let's go get good at the passing game. Unless you just devote your whole time frame to that. But I think that we're better now throwing the football than what we were a week ago, which is better than what we were 2 weeks ago, which was better than what we were 3 weeks ago. And we're getting to that point now to where I'm feeling an awful lot more comfortable with the fact that if we needed to go out there and throw it 70 times to win, that we could potentially do that. I wouldn't have been able to say that probably at the start of the season, but I think there's enough a rapport right now that with things that we could actually start looking into that possibility.
Coach, you mentioned after the LSU game you were kind of disappointed there in special teams. I know, what was it, Thursday or Friday, that's all y'all focused on special teams. What kind of tweaks did you have to make to kind of address that area?
I don't know that we had to tweak anything in relation to scheme. Obviously, we recognized that game was going to be a field position game. We knew that both defenses were the strengths of both teams. And so field position becomes really, really critical. They blocked us better than what I would have liked to have seen them block us on their kickoff return. We got blocked a little too well on their punt return that they had. We shank a punt, which is unlike us. We don't kick the ball out of the end zone, which we were attempting to do on the one kickoff that we had. And so, those opportunities necessary to flip the field, which becomes pretty critical, because special teams is all about points or yards, right? Huge chunks of yards or points, and so that's why they call them special. It's because it's pretty special moments, and you have to be kind of one snap warriors out there. You might be guys that it might be their moment to shine, and at that point in time, they got to shine a little bit better. I think that it was a good opportunity for some of our younger players to be in that kind of environment. I was really pleased with our older players because they walked out and they looked around and then they kind of went and played. Some of our younger players, in pregame, when we walked out there, they had their little cell phones with them and they were taking pictures of the stadium, and doing their little videos, that kind of thing. And that just shows that they're immature because they haven't been in those situations before. But I was pretty pleased with our older guys, younger guys. That was a good opportunity for them to kind of grow up and understand some things, and we'll grow up from that.
You mentioned that from game to game, it's not about the pregame speeches and things like that. It's not going to get the guys hyped up. But having said that, it's homecoming this week. So what added incentive do you think that adds for getting the players motivated to win this game?
Well, I don't know that homecoming does so much. I think people in the stands do. The more people that are there, the more you want to please them. This group wants to please, and so I think it's not necessarily the event itself; it's the number of people in the stands that I think can help motivate a team along those lines because everybody wants to please. But bottom line, Ron, I think is great players, they show up all the time, right? You've heard me say it before. My players have heard it so many times they're probably sick of hearing it. They show up all the time. Concrete, turf. One person in the stands, 100,000 people in the stands. Those guys just want to see somebody put a ball down. And so from a motivation standpoint, I think most of the motivation's internal. If you've got the right guys, it's internal. They know where their hot button is. They're excited about playing. And, again, they're ready to play regardless.
But at the same time, that you talked about how frustrated they were after LSU and chomping at the bit to probably play another game. So having a bye week and then getting back into conference play, does it play into your advantage about just wanting to get back out there and prove themselves? Because like you said, they want to be pleasers, and I know that they feel like they left a lot on the field at LSU.
Well, I think that sometimes that motivation, that type of motivation, can last for a little while in terms of spurring you on, and so I think that is, I think that's probably true. I know it has for me, because I think it, and I think for this group of players that, again, they want to have success, they want to win, and so consequently, again, we had good practices last week at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is not one of those time frames when generally everybody else is kind of up and ready to go. Night practice on Sunday, just kind of throwing a few curveballs at them a little bit in relation to when we're doing things, because again, you want to respond, and I think this group has shown already that they will respond, and we've got a heavy task ahead against us, against a very, very dangerous football team, and they are dangerous. I don't care what their record is. I've watched them on video. They're an athletic football team. They're dangerous. And we need to go out and take care of our business, but we need to play to our standard and not worry about kind of who we're playing. We just need to raise our standard, and that's always going to be the case.
Coach, ultimately at the end of the season, it's about winning most conference wins, and all it seems a lot of teams haven't even gotten into conference play. You got a chance to go 2-0, which is a nice pace to set.
There's no question that the conference games have a little bit more value to them, because that's one of our goals, is to be competitive within the conference for the conference championship, and obviously for us too. I think that it becomes really critical in relation to, because the way our conference is set up and some of the limited bowl opportunities is, you better, if you want to go to a bowl game and guarantee that, you better go win the conference championship, because you might not have another opportunity, and so. That adds some extra meaning to it. But again, I think that great competitors, they want to win all the time, and there's maybe a little bit extra motivation, but it's really just, again, we want to be 1-0 this week, conference, non-conference, whatever. Just want to be I want to be 1-0. That's the way that I want them to be too.
Probably know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
With having Troy coming in, and clearly, it didn't look like they overlooked an Idaho team who was 1-11 last year. A team coming in 0-4, and like Coach Blakely said at his press conference yesterday, our slate's clean. We're still 0-0 in the conference, and so they still have everything to play for, really. And so, do you have to remind your guys about they're not going to be coming in licking their wounds, because they feel like all their opportunities are in front of them? Right. Or do you have to even say that to the guys, because as you've mentioned before, this is a really mature group?
I think that I mentioned it last week about kind of where they were at, where they were sitting, that type of thing. I don't know, again, if you have the culture established the way that you want it, then the only thing you have to do is look around college football. I don't think they need necessary reminders. I mean, Northwestern State beating Louisiana Tech. I mean, who gave that much thought? I mean, you look around at all of the games that were out there where somebody point spreads and all those other kinds of things, and how people overcome. I think it's very, very difficult right now in college football to do a whole lot of predicting, other than if you play well, then you put yourself a chance to win. And if you don't play well, then you're setting yourself up for a loss. I know that to be true. The rest of it, and that's all I can ask of our players, obviously, is you play better today than what you did tomorrow or yesterday. And as long as you do that, then you're growing as a player, and then you have to obviously play better tomorrow. And as long as you're working that, that's all I can ever ask of them.
Last year at Troy, it seemed like there was a lot coming out party for Jalen Holly, and I know he had to step having a great game until, his injury. But going into this game and knowing what Troy usually does offensively, how confident are you? Because a lot of those receivers are back, and they've already shown some really great things this year.
I like those first three guys in our receiver group in terms of the wide receivers, and I like how competitive they are. I like their abilities, and as I mentioned last week, and I think it's even getting better. I think that chemistry that the quarterback has with the receivers and the rapport that he has, I think that's rising, and we want to continue obviously that to have that. But you're right, Jalen had a tremendous game last year, and it was Halloween, so maybe that was the reason why. But it was his real introduction to saying, you know what, I can play at this level. And I think again, every player kind of comes to that point to where they have that moment, and it was great to see him have that moment last year during that time frame. And obviously, he's continued on along with that.
And there seemed to be good chemistry with those guys, especially with Pete and the receivers against Idaho, especially. You don't get to see a lot of those guys after the game, but with a guy like Pete, who obviously is still feeling his way through the playbook and getting better every week, what was his reaction like after the game, and knowing that this was his first time to play an SEC game, but the whole team seemed to be really optimistic going in? Was he frustrated with himself, just knowing that he had progressed every single week? It seemed like.
Yeah, I think he was disappointed in the loss. He did some good things. There's some things that he needs to correct also, just like every player on the team, every coach on the team, right? All of us need to get better every week in what we do and how we approach it. I think Pete really likes this team. I'll let him talk about that. But he's said to me multiple times, and I think he's even addressed you along those lines. I think he likes this team's demeanor and the way that we carry ourselves. And he did express to me that not all teams are like that, and he's seen other teams that become that frustrated after a loss, and especially in that kind of environment. Because I know even for him, even though he's a fifth-year senior, he's played a lot of games and all that, he walked into that stadium and said this is pretty special, and so there's some new things for him also along those lines, and that's part of the reason why, if you look at our schedules on out, obviously we're still going to play in some great stadiums in years to come, and I want our players kind of growing up seeing some of those things, so they don't take them off guard to where it's not just once every 4 years that you're playing somebody like that. And then obviously they pay money too, and that's always a good thing.
Coach, you had the camo out the first game. Troy last year broke out the All Blacks. Do you have any kind of special this Saturday? I
don't think so.
What a letdown.
Well, I'm kind of just more into practicing and playing, and I'm not into. I let the other people kind of handle all the marketing aspects of things and how that kind of goes along. Even though my degree was in marketing, I've got my hands full enough with just trying to coach football. So I'll let other people kind of worry about those things. And I know one thing: at 6:04, regardless of whether we're in some crazy tutu uniform or something along those lines, or if we're out there in shorts, at 6:04, somebody's putting the ball down, and I'm more worried about the putting the ball down than I am about the other things.